A largely forgotten author today, William H. Hodgson is nonetheless unquestionably one of the great names of Anglo-Saxon fantastic literature. His novels were admired by Lovecraft, and he influenced Lovecraft's two principal friends and disciples, Clark Ashton Smith and August Derleth. And it is hard not to see in one of his main characters the detective Thomas Carnacki, the ancestor of Harry Dickson, created by the Belgian writer Jean Ray. His literary reputation suffered from the brevity of his career from 1904 to 1914, but even more so from a style considered archaic even in his own time, so steeped in Renaissance turns of phrase that some have detected a Shakespearean influence in it. The son of an Anglican clergyman, the second of 12 children, he ran away from home at the age of 13 in 1890 and signed on with the Merchant Navy as a cabin boy. Having become an officer, he developed a passion for photography and assembled a fine collection of maritime images. In 1898, he was decorated for saving a colleague from drowning, but he left the profession the following year. He briefly became an assistant to the magician Harry Houdini before the two men fell out, the escape artist accusing his associate of having handcuffed him too tightly before a demonstration. Hodgson eventually opened a physical culture studio in London. At the same time, he exhibited his photographs of storms, typhoons, and the northern lights, and gave lectures on his experiences at sea. An avid reader of Edgar Allan Poe, H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, and Arthur Conan Doyle, he published his first short story in 1904, The Goddess of Death, a tale of supernatural horror. The sea also played a major role in his inspiration, and as early as 1905 he published The Voice in the Night, recounting how a sea monster boards a ship and gradually exterminates the entire crew. The story is narrated by the sole survivor, one of the ship's cabin boys. William H. Hodgson would return regularly to this vein with The Derelict, The Ghost Pirates, and The Boats of the Glen Carrig, which recounts the adventures of a group of 18th century shipwreck survivors confronting the mysteries and fantastical bestiary of the Sargasso Sea. It was not a sound of feet dragging along the ground, nothing like the sound one makes when walking, nor even like the beating of a bat's wings, which had, in fact, been my first thought, knowing that vampires are reputed to haunt gloomy places by night. Nor was it the hiss of a serpent, rather it brought to mind the sound a damp cloth might make, being dragged across the floor, and the watertight bulkheads. It was at the moment this thing brushed against the far side of the door, behind which we stood listening, that we were best able to test the accuracy of that comparison. You may be sure we both recoiled, mad with terror. In 1908, he published the book that earned him, if not commercial success, at least the sympathetic attention of critics, The House on the Borderland. The novel is set in Ireland near Galway. A man finds himself besieged by giant swine-faced monstrosities in an old house isolated on the moor. There is something Lovecraftian in this inexplicable horror arising out of nothing. Lovecraft himself recognized as much when he wrote that few writers could equal Hodgson's ability to sketch the shape of nameless forces and monstrous nearby entities through incidental allusions and seemingly unimportant details, or to convey the sense of the supernatural and the abnormal weighing upon a landscape or a dwelling, adding that The House on the Borderland was undoubtedly Hodgson's masterpiece. However, the work by Hodgson that probably deserves the most attention, although it is likely the least appreciated and understood, is a novel published in 1912, The Night Land. Set in the far distant future, 100,000 years from our own time, the plot unfolds on a frozen Earth, deprived of its sun, now nothing more than a dead star. Humanity, or what remains of it, lives huddled inside gigantic pyramids, besieged by repugnant abominations lurking in what has become an eternal night. Once again, Lovecraft was full of praise, describing it as one of the finest works of imaginative horror ever written, and noting that the depiction of a dead planet plunged into darkness with its hybrid, monstrous, and wholly unknown forces of shadow is something no reader could ever forget. That these shadow lurkers are suggested and partially described with ineffable power, while the landscape of this land of night, with its chasms, mountains, and extinct volcanoes, is steeped in an ever-present sense of terror through the magic and vision of its author, and that reading it leaves one with a feeling of cosmic hostility, inanimate mystery, and terrifying expectation unique in all of fantastic literature. Despite an occasionally clumsy style, The Nightland is probably one of the missing links between English Gothic literature and modern science fiction, which accounts for its importance. Married in 1912, Hodgson retired to Provence with his wife to continue writing. In 1914, he decided to enlist in the British Army without waiting to be conscripted. Severely wounded in the head in 1916, he was discharged, yet he re-enlisted in 1917. He was literally blown to pieces by a shell during the Battle of the Lys in April 1918. His literary memory was kept alive by his widow, who ensured his works were regularly reprinted until her death in 1943. Hodgson's stories reach the heights of both the fantastic and the realistic combined. They resemble nothing else in all of fantastic literature.